All right, just for fun. My neck was hurting, so that's why I have this pillow. I'm gonna read a story called "The Bagbury Bull." There once was an evil old man who was a squire at Bagbury near Hissington in the southwest of Shropshire. Local lore tells that in all his life he only ever did two good deeds. He once gave bread and cheese to a starving child, although the bread was stale and the cheese was moldy. And another time he gave his waistcoat to a beggar man. It was a hot day, and the squire was glad to be rid of the extravagantly embroidered garment. He made people's lives a misery with his mean and money grabbing ways. A few locals sought the help of a local hen wife, a witch, and asked her to make a charm to rid them of the old man forever. The old croon thought long and hard about the request and twiddled the long curly whiskers on her bony chin as she rocked in her chair in front of the fire and leafed through her recipe books. After many weeks of thought, locked in her cottage deep in the woods, the old hag one day shuffled into the village and presented a powder wrapped in a large leaf and bound with a string of flax. She declared that this was a spell that would ensure the miserable old squire never got peace in this life or the next. The villagers were happy with the prospect of his eternal torment, and the powder was passed to a serving girl at the squire's house. She managed to slip the grains into the old man's wine. The villagers endured the remaining years of the miserable old squire's life, consoled by the fact that his punishment awaited him beyond the grave. Eventually, the squire died, but the witch's potion backfired somewhat, for the squire's spirit took on the form of a monstrous, bellowing, snorting bull. Hey, that makes sense for the illustration now, huh? That would stamp out the lanes, trample the crops, and terrorize the villagers night after night. The eternal torment, it seemed, was to be theirs, and not his. The local parson decided that enough was enough, and an exorcism had to be performed to lay the ghost to rest. The entire village and a team of parsons rounded up the ferocious beast and led it to the church at Hissington. The parson stood in the pulpit and led the incantations of psalms and prayers above the roars of the bull as it careered and kicked around the church. Another parson joined in. The first shadows of night played on the whitewashed walls of the church, and the bull began to visibly shrink before the eyes of the astonished villagers and the earnest clergy. It was overpowered by the words of the good book. As night fell around them, candles were lit to keep the powers of darkness at bay as the exorcism continued. Presenting the bull was no bigger than a dog, but inexhaustibly bucking and snorting around. All at once the little bull managed one mighty howling bellow and snuffed out every single candle. The congregation was plunged into darkness. In the darkness the doorway to the evil world had been opened, and the bull began to grow rapidly and crazily beyond its original size until it filled the entire church. So huge, fat, and strong was the spirit that it caused the roof timbers to groan and the stonework cracked with the pressure of his huge body. It just so happened that one of the parsons was blind. He didn't need a candle to read the scriptures, as he knew them by heart, and he carried on reciting, despite the bull's furious roars that practically drowned out his voice. A single candle was relit, and the parson's persistent prayers, combined with the glimmer of light, were enough to diminish the forces of evil once more. On and on they prayed. The blind parson and again the bull began to shrink to the size of an elephant, then a horse, then a dog and a cat, and finally then a mouse. The miniature bull was scooped up and placed into one of the bystanders' boots. This was tightly laced up and buried deep under the weathered threshold step of the church. A builder was recently asked to install a ramp for disabled access into the church and was under strict instructions not to disturb the slab on the step. He was careful to obey. It is said that until more recent work on the church was carried out, the cracks from where the enormous spectral bull strained against the walls were still visible. So that was that for that one. I guess just a story of a guy getting sentenced to curse the world after his death, but he ends up coming back and cursing the same people that were trying to get him. Got my dogs here with me. Yeah, and so it's called the Bagbury Bull, and it's from Shropshire Ghost Stories. We got That's the very first one. We got a lot more to go though, and I'll read the other ones later.